Welcome to the Spurs Roundtable, powered by Project Spurs. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, and well, the streak is over. And of course, it came at the hands of the Oklahoma City Thunder, which has got a lot of Spurs fans up in a little bit of a bind right now. To talk about that and a lot more, I am joined by Stephen Anderson and, of course, Chelsea Torres, also ProjectSpurs.com. By the way, Stephen is making his debut today, so no pressure today because we're going to jump into a topic that a lot of Spurs fans are talking about, the Thunder. Yeah. The Thunder have defeated the Spurs for the 4th time this season, making San Antonio 0-4 against them. Let's just face it, OKC owns the Spurs, don't they?
I would have to disagree and say no, they don't. Because, I mean, if you look
They
don't? Because if you look at the 4 matchups, the Spurs were only healthy for one of those matchups, which was the first one, and that was too early in the year to really judge where these two teams match. You have the second game of the season where you had Thiago Splitter and Danny Green both out with injuries. Tony Parker was just getting back from his shin injury. Right. He was missing 2 games, and so he wasn't really up to form like we normally see him.
Sure.
The other game was Russell Westbrook was out for OKC because of the knee surgery, and we had Kawhi Leonard out because of a dental procedure.
Right.
And then the most recent one on Thursday, which to be honest wasn't expected loss for the Spurs.
He's got to be crazy, right? He just be thinking of just something totally different right now, making excuses right now, because Chelsea, this Thunder team looks like they have San Antonio's number.
I wouldn't say they have their number, but I think that they know, they kind of have an idea of how we can play, especially now at the streak that we were going at. But I don't think anybody should still be worried. Like I said beforehand, Tony Parker did not play what we've normally seen him. He was, I think throughout the season he's kind of been conserving his energy a little bit for the playoffs. But right now against Westbrook, he was kind of losing a little bit of that energy. Westbrook was consistently able to get to a lot of places on the floor to get those shots. Not only that, like Steven said, we didn't have Manu. Steph also wasn't out. Kevin Durant is always somebody to be scared of.
But then again, who can't stop Kevin Durant, when he's on?
Exactly. But I don't think that they have our number yet.
Well, I might have to disagree with you. I think Spurs fans should be worried about the Thunder. This is a team that, at least in the 4 games, they look a little bit like they want the game more. They want to stop Big Brother. They want to show that, hey, we're the next big kids in the block down the Western Conference. What I like about what the OKC does against San Antonio is on the defensive end. They really disrupt any type of flow before San Antonio gets their offensive set. You see Serge Ibaka hedging a bit. You see Russell Westbrook really getting up on Tony Parker. And let's just face it, this Oklahoma team might have exposed San Antonio a little bit in the sense that the Spurs, they don't like a physical game. Stephen.
Well, I mean, if you look at that last game, the most recent one Thursday against Oklahoma City, they really, like I said, they wanted the game more. It was clear, and they knew the Spurs had a 4-game lead on the Thunder, and they knew they needed this game. Otherwise, it's basically over. The Spurs would get the #1 seed. They knew they needed that game. That's why they cranked up the defense in the second half. They used a solid third quarter when they outscored the Spurs 32-20 in that third quarter. And some of those were just really plays you don't see. And another thing, in the playoffs, it's going to be a totally different story. You're not going to see Oklahoma City get 3 days off like they did Thursday. You're not going to see the Spurs play 5 games in 7 nights and on the second end of a back-to-back. It's just not going to happen. So I think when playoffs roll around, it's going to be a totally different story. And I do feel confident that the Spurs can win a 7-game series against the Thunder.
You got to factor this into Chelsea. This is the same Thunder team that pretty much swept the Spurs in the playoffs, coming back from the deficit they were 4 games straight in the playoffs a couple of seasons ago. They seem to own the Spurs during the regular season. Is there anything else that maybe stands out? Perhaps their athleticism, their youth?
The fact that they are very athletic, they're young, they're tall, lanky. That's why I agree with you. What you were just saying, Jeff, about how defensively they can get the shots out. We have the quick passes, we have the quick shots, but if they're there defensively, I mean, that's where we kind of get a little fragile. I do, though, agree with Steven. They're not going to have those 3-day games, or 3-day breaks that we just saw. Not only that, but come playoff time, we're going to have the home court advantage.
Right. Now, Steven, before we started recording, you had mentioned that perhaps Pop deliberately sat Manu down. Deliberately looked like maybe he wasn't running the typical flows on the offensive end. What struck you about that during the loss?
Well, I mean, it's a back-to-back, and we all know Pop usually sits one of the stars in the back-to-back game. Well, Manu obviously sitting out, he creates a lot of what the Spurs do on the offensive end, whether it's driving the paint, dishing out to Kawhi or Danny for an assist, whatever have you. He normally is key in that. And when we played Oklahoma City, only Tony was really able to do that. Marco Bellinelli's not really known to dribble into the paint. It was only Tony and Manu who were really, truly known for doing that. And another thing I noticed is that with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, it was a 10-point game. The Spurs could have easily came back in that game, but Pop chose to sit our starters, put in Jeff Ayers. When you know Jeff Ayers is in the game, come on, you know it's.
So he's throwing the white flag in early.
I call him the human, victory cigar or the human white flag. It's either one of those. He's going to be in the game, and when he's in the game, you usually think, okay, you know what, he gave up.
You know, guys, we're talking about regular season versus postseason. Regular season pretty much doesn't mean anything when you head into the postseason. Do you think that's type of the mentality that this team is taking into the postseason? Should they meet Oklahoma in the playoffs?
I truly believe so. The Spurs, when it comes down to playoffs, it's a lot slower of a game. It's more defensive, and I think that the Spurs realize that. And I think for Pop, it's going to be a great time because now we had that long streak. We, lost to OKC, but now it's time to go back to the drawing board and kind of do what Pop loves to do.
Well, Pop probably wanted them to lose.
Exactly.
I think what did they say during this whole week? He's craving a loss.
Exactly. And now he can go back to teaching and do what he loves to do, which is exactly what Aaron had said a few weeks ago. So I think it's a good thing that we did lose, and we can see kind of where we need to stand now and go into playoffs.
Should Spurs fans be worried about being swept by Oklahoma City in the regular season?
No.
No.
Why not?
Because, like I said, it's regular season's regular season. You can't tell anything from regular season games. There's a lot of factors, injuries, back-to-backs, scheduling, things like that.
Well, there's also this, too, guys. Looming kind of behind in the shadows right now is another team that I don't think Spurs fans are really focusing on right now, and that is Houston. Houston, they have not beaten them in 3 shots this regular season. They got the last one coming up this week. That's another team that presents problems just like Oklahoma City does. So that's something that the Spurs fan really should be focusing on right now. But something else that came up, we're talking about the team right now, and especially the core, the trio of TD, TP, and Manu. Tony Parker recently came out and in an interview with a French website saying that he knows that that Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili will return one more season next year. Spurs fans might be looking at the final year of the golden age of the San Antonio Spurs, the last season of the Big Three. Steven, you're kind of on the fence about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the national media all the time usually says, the Spurs championship window is closing every year, but they always prove them wrong. And currently, #1 seed in the West, best record in the NBA, so they're doing pretty good for themselves every single year. But it is true, that window is closing, and it's going to be here before Spurs fans know it. However, Tony did say that, Tim and Manu would return next year. But I think if the Spurs win it this year, win it all, Timmy goes out on top. I don't think he wants to try to return for a second season and possibly get eliminated in the first round.
Chelsea, Tim Duncan has a player option after this year. It's up to him. He wants to come back next year. Do you agree with Steven? If they do win the title, that's it? TD is done?
I partly agree with that. But I just feel like he loves the game so much. I mean, he's done so well this past season. Not only that, his knees are doing great for him. As we've seen the past few years, they haven't always done that great. So maybe he wants to continue, going at this, little newfound youth that he might have found. But I think it all depends really on what happens in the playoffs.
I've always said that of the 3, it would be Manu to be the one to retire first. Just a lot of wear and tear, playing with Team Argentina during the summer, the injuries that he sustained throughout. He's probably sustained more injuries than TD and TP probably have had in their careers. So I always felt that it'll be Manu will be the first one to do it. But I definitely would like to see them do one more year, one more go.
Of course.
Go out on top. If they win it all this year, maybe Steve is right. TD or Manu will hang it up. TP won't.
No.
He won't. He said he wants to play till his wheels come off, till the bitter end. But yeah, I mean, regardless, even if they do come back, championship or not, next season might be it. This might be the season that Spurs fans have been dreading for years, and seeing 3 of the best players ever in Spurs history to call it quits. But before we continue talking about this, because Steven's going to start crying in a bit if I talk about more about Tim Duncan and Manu leaving, definitely go out to ProjectSpurs.com. Read everything about the Spurs, any type of coverage. I mean, from even the foreign prospects we have out overseas right now. Definitely read Steven's article on the Oklahoma City Thunder and their owning of the Spurs. I think they own the Spurs. He definitely disagrees. But for Chelsea Torres and Steven Anderson, I am Jeff Garcia. Thanks again for watching the Spurs Roundtable.